Hello dear students, this is yet another video in the video series that aims to help you boost your score in the essay paper of the Civil Services Mains Examination. And today we are going to learn exactly how are we supposed to approach philosophical essays so as to score maximum possible marks in the philosophical essays. As you all know that the pattern of the essay paper has evolved in a way that you have to compulsorily attempt one philosophical essay. And dear students, when it comes to philosophical essays, a large chunk of students have certain discomfort or they find it tricky to attempt philosophical essays. Basically, they don't have a clear idea as to how this paper has to be attempted. And even for certain students, it is nothing less than a nightmare even. But in today's video, we will understand that philosophical essays are not only very easy, but they are also very scoring at the same time. So let's start with today's agenda. I'll be focusing on certain fundamental rules, certain fundamental aspects of writing philosophical essays. Let's start with I'm using the example of a sample essay to make it more comprehensible to you. The sample topic that I am using is life must be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. That is the title of our philosophical essay. And here we have an introduction before us. Now what has been written in the introduction? The introduction uses the story or the reference of Karl Marx, and it goes on to write about how Karl Marx tried to take cue from history and provide solution to the existing problems. And in the same introduction, we have references to the American blacks, to the Dalits in India, the Ahmadiyyas of Pakistan, and so on is the course of the introduction. So as you can see, the introduction is very much rooted in current practical realities. Now, I have interacted with many students and I have seen many copies of different students, and I have seen this pattern that if they are attempting a philosophical essay, they just tend to turn the philosophical essay into an enlarged version of an ethics answer, where they will write paragraph after paragraph, idea after idea on philosophies of life. Like this topic talks of life, understanding it backwards and living it forward. So they will write various discourses among philosophers, be it Bhagavad Gita, Gautam Buddha, Jainism, even Socrates. And the whole essay, starting from the introduction, talks about philosophies as propounded by these great scholars. Now you can mention about these scholars and you can bring in a little philosophy that you study in the ethics paper, but that doesn't have to be overdone. In fact, what you need to do is to keep your paper as practical as possible and as application based as possible. Coming back to the introduction, you can see it is very much practical. We talk about American blacks, Dalits, Ahmadiyyas of Pakistan, taking reference from ideas of Karl Marx and so on. But ultimately, it must strike the root of the title. That is the only caveat. And as we can see at the end of the introduction, what is written? That ultimately his ideas remained more theoretical than practical. Thus, past experiences or history should be seen as a guide to our lives, but a conducive feature needs to be crafted imaginatively rather than becoming prisoners of history. So, a pretty direct connect, and it shows your understanding of the topic very, very beautifully. So keeping it practical, application based, and not turning it into an enlarged ethics answer. That is the first fundamental point. Okay, moving ahead. After the introduction comes a very, very important component of your philosophical essay, the second paragraph, which we also term as the definitional paragraph. Basically, we are involved in deconstruction in this paragraph. Now, what do I mean by deconstruction? Taking example of this very topic, life must be understood backwards and it must be lived forward. Now, what keywords do you have in this title? One would be life, another would be understanding it backwards, third would be living it forward. So, what do you understand by life? What do you understand by understanding life backwards, living life forward? That you need to describe well in the paragraph. Just for example, what we have written here in the definitional paragraph. Life has a broader connotation. It can mean the life of living experiences of a living person, a community, a society, even a nation. So we are taking a broad connotation of life and not restricting it to the life of a single individual. Similarly, we expand on the meaning of understanding life backwards and living life forward. So this paragraph essentially conveys your interpretation of the topic and your understanding of the topic to the examiner, number one. And number two, it acts as a reference, it acts as a guiding force for you, that whenever you need or whenever you have a mental block while writing the essay, you can refer to this definitional paragraph and take cue from this paragraph and proceed in your essay. Just for example, we have taken a broad connotation of life, that it can mean a life of the life of an individual, community, society, nation, and so on. So taking cue from this description of life, we decide the approach of this particular essay, and we have used the layers approach. Now I'll be talking about the layers approach in the later part of the video, but the point being raised that we could easily use a particular approach, layers approach in this case, because the kind of definition or description that we gave in the second paragraph, which is also our definitional paragraph, a very, very important component, my dear students. Moving ahead, I've talked about layers approach. So what is layers approach essentially? We move our analysis in the form of layers. Like we analyze the topic in terms of an individual, then a higher level, it may be a community, then further higher, it may be a society, a state, a region, nation, and even moving on to the global level. That is, we are moving from one layer to other, and as you can see here, our analysis moves in a very standard format upwards from micro to macro level analysis. Okay, coming back to this paragraph, layers approach. Now I written something about pestle approach as well. Now most of you must be knowing what is pestle approach. It is nothing but analyzing the topic from political, economic, social, technological, environmental, legal, historical dimensions and so on, and it is the most common approach used by students, and it serves the purpose in conventional essays that are part of part A. But in philosophical essays, pestle approach doesn't serve the purpose or doesn't meet the demand of the topic in majority of the cases. So we need to avoid using pestle approach in philosophical essays as much as possible, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to use pestle approach at all. If the topic so demands, or if you are not well versed with the other approaches that I'm going to talk about, then you have no other option but to use the pastel approach. So the road to pastel approach is open, but our motive is to try to avoid it as much as possible. So if we are avoiding pastel approach, what other approaches can we use? So one alternative approach can be the entities approach. Just for example, there was a topic in UPSC essay that the character of an institution is determined by the character of its leader. Now here institutions are those entities, and we can start from family. Now family is also a very important social institution, and we can go as far as the United Nations organization, which is a global institution. Midway we can talk about social institutions, NGOs, grassroots institutions, Panchayati Raj, and so on. That would be the entities approach. Stakeholder approach. Now, stakeholder approach would mean if you are confronted with a topic, just say for example, a topic on morality. So what would be a morality for a Dalit person, a morality for a woman, morality of a bureaucrat, morality of a doctor, and so on. If this approach suits the topic, you can certainly use the stakeholder approach. And thirdly, the layers approach that we are talking about, and we will discuss in a bit more detail. Just for example, in the first paragraph, we have mentioned about the individual, talking in terms of the layers approach, individual, and then we have given reference to Ashoka the Great, and again how it transformed him after the Kalinga War, again linking it explicitly with the title of the essay. Further, we move ahead and we talk about the community. After individual level, we are talking about the community level, and we are giving reference about the tribal communities and how they are using their historical traditional knowledge to benefit. And there we have given example of TKDL, or traditional knowledge digital library. And from community level, we move on to societal level. And at societal level, we have given reference about, or reference to, apartheid in the context of South Africa, and how despite having historical prejudices, historical injustices, how the black people and the ruling whites arrived at an amicable constitution. That's the societal level analysis. From societal level, we move on to the international arena. In the international arena, we give an argument and then move on to give reference to USA and USSR, exactly how they used their past experiences and tried to evolve and try to secure a better future for the next generations. And here we have given example of START 1, START 2, SALT 1, SALT 2. These are essentially treaties between the superpowers. So this is what we mean by the layered analysis, going upwards, micro to macro in a particular direction. I hope that is pretty clear, dear students. Moving ahead, importance of writing perspectives. Now, what are perspectives? Generally, we write 75 to 80% of our essay taking the proposition given in the title to be true. Just like in this case, life needs to be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. That is the main proposition. So we write 75 to 80% of our write-up on that lines, taking it to be true. But before concluding our essay, we negate the very premise of the topic. Let me give an example. The first perspective that we are giving, that however, reasoning ability is crucial, that it's okay to understand it backwards and to live it forward, but you can't do it if you don't have a reasoning mind, if you don't have reasoning ability. And we give reference to irrational decision makers, and to make it more specific, we give example of Adolf Hitler. that how irrational decisions make things worse for a nation, for the mankind in general. So this is perspective number one. We move ahead. Perspective number two, we write further, it is not always advisable to understand life backwards. Now again, we are negating the very premise, and we are giving reference, we are proving our point by giving reference to the COVID pandemic and how people tended to become self-centered and so on. So perspective number two. One more perspective, perspective number three, we are giving that further, at times it is not advisable to live life forward, ignoring the past experiences and learning. So past experiences and learnings, we can't discredit or discard them completely. And we prove our point by giving reference of joint families. And as we can see, that joint families are in a subtle way again emerging in urban centers. So we write that baggage of the past appears more attractive in certain cases. So perspective number three. Three paragraphs, three perspectives, and we have negated the main premise of the topic in three different ways. Now, why is this component, or why are perspectives that important? Perspectives are really important, and they tend to fetch you higher marks precisely because it conveys to the examiner that you can not only think on the topic but also beyond the topic, and you have that critical ability, and you can view that particular topic from different points of view. And an essay is essentially about how you view a particular topic. So a very, very scoring aspect of your essay, specifically the philosophical essay. Moving ahead, summarization. Many students have this problem, particularly in the philosophical essay, that how do they conclude their essay, their philosophical essay. And many a times, and especially when students have used the pastel approach, they tend to give a solution or a way forward or a futuristic vision in their conclusion. Now, dear students, keeping in mind the kind of topics that we are being confronted with, there was a topic last year, wisdom finds truth. This particular topic, life being understood backward, living it forward. So what kind of solutions or what kind of way forward do you expect that can be given? So in philosophical essays, in general, summarization is the best option. Now, what do I mean by summarization? To summarize your essay, we mean we have in this particular paragraph, which is the concluding paragraph, we have reinforced all the main arguments, all the main ideas that we have discussed in the course of the essay, and we have consolidated all the ideas for the examiner that look, this is what I have spoken in the entire essay. Definitely you need to paraphrase, you can't copy the ideas or arguments verbatim, and you try to end your essay on a positive note after you have summarized your essay. So what we learn here, in general, summarization is the best strategy in philosophical essays, but again, it's not a general rule. Just like in the case of pastel approach, if the topic of the essay demands, you may have to use a way forward, but in general, summarization is the best strategy in philosophical essays. So summing up, what fundamental aspects have we discussed that are likely to fetch higher marks for you? Number one, keeping the essay on practical lines and rooted to ground realities, rooted in the real world. Second, we have talked about deconstruction, that is the second paragraph, which we also call as our definitional paragraph. Third, we have discussed various approaches, layers approach, entities approach, stakeholder approach. Next, we have discussed the importance of perspectives, the importance of negating the very proposition given in the title. Next, we have discussed the concluding part, summarization, exactly how you need to conclude your essay. Also, we have discussed what you have to avoid. You have to avoid converting your essay into an enlarged version of an ethics answer. Further, you have to avoid the pastel approach as much as possible. Also, you need to avoid giving a way forward kind of conclusion as much as possible in philosophical essays. So, dear students, this was all about today's discussion, and I'll be coming again with such interesting videos to help you increase or boost your score in the essay paper. And apart from this, you can also avail the option of availing my mentorship for the essay paper. And if you want to avail my mentorship for the essay paper, you will find all the relevant information in the comment section below. So dear students, hope you found the video insightful. Do let us know about your take in the comment section, and if you have some suggestions, do let us know that as well. So dear students, do take very good care of yourselves. Jai Hind.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.